Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are covering a crisis that is no longer a warning, no longer a prediction, but a harsh and unfolding reality. Tehran's water lines have collapsed, and Iran's capital is now standing on the edge of one of the largest urban water emergencies the region has ever seen. What was once whispered as a distant possibility has now become unavoidable. Faucets are running dry, pressure is vanishing across entire districts, and behind closed doors, officials are preparing for something unprecedented: mass evacuation from parts of Tehran. This is not a sudden disaster caused by a single broken pipe or a seasonal drought. This is the final outcome of years of neglect, climate pressure, unchecked population growth, and deeply flawed water management. The collapse we are witnessing today has been building silently for decades, and now millions of lives are being affected all at once. For the people of Tehran, water scarcity is no longer about inconvenience. It is about survival. In recent days, residents across multiple districts began reporting something alarming. Water pressure dropped without warning. Taps that once flowed day and night suddenly produced nothing but air. Apartment buildings found their rooftop tanks empty within hours. Hospitals and clinics were forced to activate emergency reserves. Schools closed early. Businesses shut their doors. What began as isolated outages quickly spread into a citywide emergency. Authorities initially described the situation as temporary disruptions, but insiders and engineers told a very different story. Main transmission lines feeding large sections of the capital had failed under extreme stress. Aging pipelines, some more than 50 years old, could no longer handle fluctuating pressure caused by collapsing reservoir levels. Emergency repairs were attempted, but there simply wasn't enough water left in the system to restore normal flow. Tehran was running dry from the inside out. The city was never built for this scale. Decades ago, Tehran was designed to serve a population of just a few million. Today, Greater Tehran is home to more than 15 million people, and on some estimates, even more. Rural migration, economic pressure, and centralization of power pushed millions toward the capital, while infrastructure development lagged far behind. Water demand exploded. Supply did not. To keep the city alive, authorities turned aggressively to groundwater. Wells were drilled deeper and deeper. Aquifers that took thousands of years to fill were drained in a matter of decades. As groundwater levels fell, the land itself began to sink. Entire neighborhoods experienced subsidence, cracking roads, damaged pipes, and collapsing foundations. Each collapse further weakened the water network, creating a vicious cycle of failure. At the same time, climate change tightened its grip. Rainfall patterns became unpredictable, snowpack in the mountains shrank. Reservoirs that once reliably fed Tehran began shrinking year after year. Droughts grew longer and hotter. Evaporation increased. What water remained was increasingly polluted by industrial waste, agricultural runoff, and untreated sewage. And still, the city kept growing. Officials warned for years that Tehran was approaching water bankruptcy. Those warnings were ignored. Instead of reducing demand, the system was pushed harder. Water was rerouted, pressure was increased, emergency pumping continued. The illusion of normalcy was maintained until it finally collapsed. Now the consequences are impossible to hide. In many districts, water is available for only a few hours a day, if at all. Residents line up with plastic containers, hoping tanker trucks will arrive. Social media is filled with images of dry taps, empty reservoirs, and angry crowds demanding answers. Some neighborhoods report no water for days. The most alarming aspect is what is happening behind the scenes. Emergency planning documents reportedly discuss relocating populations from the most affected areas. Schools and government buildings are being assessed as temporary shelters. Hospitals are prioritizing critical cases due to limited sanitation capabilities. These are not the actions of a government expecting a quick fix. These are the preparations of a system bracing for prolonged failure. Mass evacuation is no longer a rumor, it is a contingency. For a city like Tehran, evacuation on any significant scale would be historic. Moving hundreds of thousands or even millions of people is a logistical nightmare. Where would they go? How would they survive? How would Iran's already strained economy handle such displacement? The answers are unclear. What is clear is that the crisis extends far beyond water. Without water, electricity production is affected. Without water, hospitals cannot function safely. Without water, food supply chains collapse, hygiene breaks down, disease spreads, social tension rises, protests become inevitable. Already, frustration is boiling over. Citizens are asking questions that have no comforting answers. Why were warnings ignored? Where did the water go? Who is responsible for this collapse? The government response has been cautious, controlled, and often contradictory. Public statements emphasize patience, conservation, and national unity. Officials urge people to reduce usage, as if conservation alone can solve a system that has already failed. Behind those words, however, is growing panic. Iran's water crisis is not limited to Tehran. Cities across the country are suffering. Lakes have vanished, rivers have dried, entire provinces depend on water trucks, but Tehran is different. Political, PARTICLEECONOMIC, and administrative life form if Tehran fails, the consequences ripple across the entire nation. This is why the collapse of Tehran's water lines is such a dangerous turning point. Engineers warn that even if emergency repairs succeed, the underlying problem remains. There simply isn't enough water left to sustain the city at its current size. Rebuilding pipelines does nothing if reservoirs stay empty. Drilling deeper wells only accelerates land subsidence and infrastructure damage. Importing water from distant regions creates conflict with already suffering provinces. There is no easy solution. Some experts suggest that Tehran, as it exists today, is unsustainable, that the city must shrink, that population must be redistributed, that industries must relocate. These are radical ideas, but reality is forcing them into the conversation. For ordinary citizens, the crisis feels deeply personal. Parents worry about their children. Elderly residents fear heat and dehydration. Families debate whether to leave the city voluntarily before conditions worsen. For many, leaving is not an option. Jobs, homes, and livelihoods are tied to Tehran. The psychological impact is immense. A city that once symbolized opportunity and power now represents uncertainty and fear. International observers are watching closely. A mass evacuation in Tehran would send shockwaves through the region. It would expose how vulnerable modern megacities are to water collapse. It would challenge assumptions about stability, governance, and climate resilience. This crisis is not just about Iran. It is a warning to the world. Cities everywhere are growing faster than their resources. Water systems built for the past are being pushed beyond their limits. Climate stress is accelerating. What is happening in Tehran today could happen elsewhere tomorrow. As the situation continues to unfold, one thing is clear. Tehran's water collapse is not a temporary emergency. It is a structural failure with long-term consequences. The coming weeks and months will determine whether Iran can stabilize its capital or whether this crisis will spiral into something far larger. For now, millions wait anxiously, listening to empty pipes, watching dry taps, and wondering how long a city can survive without water. Stay with us as we continue to follow this developing story, because what happens next in Tehran may redefine the future of Iran itself